Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents How to Manage Your Money When You Don't Have Any by Erik Wecks, narrated by Neil Hellegers. Preface to the second edition. Wow, I'm not really sure what else to say. The response to the first edition of How to Manage Your Money When You Don't Have Any has far exceeded my hopes and dreams. I am truly grateful to know that over 60,000 families have benefited from the book. That still blows my mind. A lot has changed since the fall of 2011 when I wrote the first edition. In just over 3.5 years, our economy has improved drastically. Employment finally looks like it has turned around. There are hints that some of the long-term unemployed may be re-entering the workforce. Even so, some of the underlying structure remains the same. Wages are just starting to rise, and many families still live month to month. More ominously to me, personal debt is growing again in the United States. It currently sits at $860 billion. More interestingly, the debt is concentrated in fewer households, with the percentage of households using personal debt products about 10% lower than it was in 2008. So while some of us learned our lesson, there are still a whole lot of families who prefer enriching the bankers instead of themselves. There's still lots of work to do. If this is your first time listening to How to Manage Your Money When You Don't Have Any, you may hear echoes of a darker time in the text. I think that's a good thing. When I went to revise the text, I found that even I had forgotten how difficult the Great Recession had been for me personally. During the dark years, I survived 3 career changes without losing my home. The principles of this book will show you how that was even possible. I know that such hard times may feel far away for many of you, a memory best left buried. Now is the time to get ready, to prepare for the next fiscal meltdown. For even if the dark days are now sunny, and thank goodness they are, wisdom is often found in a voice from a different time. This book can teach you to keep your eye on the ball before the next recession makes it difficult for us all. It's not just the economy that has improved in the last few years. My writing style has also changed quite a bit. For one thing, I haven't written much nonfiction until recently. As I started reading back through the text of the first edition, I was worried that I would cringe as I read my work. Instead, I was pleasantly surprised at how well it had held up. Oh, there were grammar problems and convoluted sentences, but I think much of the success of the first edition came from its personable style and my story. It's a relatable book, and that's something that I didn't want to remove from the text. That said, the section on strategies needed a complete reorganization. The changes in that section were extensive, although the content remained largely the same. In a few places, some of the information felt a little dated. For example, the information on what to do when you get behind on your mortgage was completely out of date. In late 2011, the banks were just beginning to responsibly manage their backlog of delinquent owners. Since then, the post-recession refinance options have widened significantly, so the section on falling behind was rewritten. Perhaps the most significant change came from Kay Moore, a friend and editor who gave the book a thorough scrubbing. You owe Kay a huge debt of gratitude for taking a book of worthwhile content and frustrating errors and turning it into something much less irritating. Thank you, Kay. I hope How to Manage Your Money When You Don't Have Any helps you as it has so many others. I'm looking forward to the next few years of economic improvement and to hearing your success stories. Erik Wecks, March 2015, Vancouver, Washington. Preface to the first edition. Since the beginning of the Great Recession, gallons of ink have been spilled trying to create cosmic justice for past sins and present economic iniquities. For those of us damaged by the disaster, much of that passion feels like wasted time and energy. This isn't one of those books. This book is for the disheartened listener who, for whatever reason, is having trouble remembering their life before they felt financially out of control. While this book offers no solutions to make corporations behave like decent, ethical people, it does offer a simple, clear path toward a more stable financial existence for those willing to accept it. Listeners of all income levels can find its simple financial plan useful. However, since this book focuses on doing your very best with your current income, listeners looking for discussions on long-term planning or investments might be disappointed. Don't misunderstand. Long-term planning is vital for financial stability, but there are so many other great books on the topic we won't deal with those topics here. So if your concerns revolve around what will happen to your child's financial aid when you gift them a large portfolio of stocks, this book may have little to offer you. On the other hand, if your concerns revolve around how to make sure you can afford to pay a mortgage on an upside-down house so your child has a roof over their head, this book is for you. If you have heard other personal finance books, I hope you aren't disappointed to find this one a little different. Many, but not all, personal finance books offer what I call the bowl of popcorn approach to financial advice. They are full of little chewy nuggets of information that may or may not be useful on a daily basis. Very few of them offer a single coherent financial plan integrated throughout the book. Notable exceptions exist. My aim is to be among them. For the author, the risk with aiming a little higher than popcorn advice is that I may lose my audience along the way. A book of popcorn is safe because just about everybody can find something useful in such a book. Everyone goes home a winner and no one gets hurt. But nuggets of advice have very little power to comfort us or assist us if we are experiencing any serious financial problems. In order to help households truly suffering from the effects of the Great Recession, I will have to ask for something from my listeners, and so I risk alienating many of them. If you're going to benefit from this book, you and I will have to agree that lasting change takes more than simply changing what you do. Lasting change also requires that you alter what you believe about money. To me, changing what you do without changing what you believe is very similar to dieting. The weight comes off, but unless you come to believe that healthy foods can satisfy your cravings better than junk food, the diet won't work. As soon as your diet ends, you'll go right back to eating the way you ate before and end up putting the weight back on. The same holds true with financial changes. I can teach you how to avoid impulse purchases at the grocery store, but that won't help you if your belief system about money is broken. You will just impulse buy online instead. Remember, your values and choices have caused or at least contributed to your stress. Are you ready to try something different? In our house, we have a saying, 2 + 2 always equals 4. If you believe and do the same things you did in the past, you will get the same results in the future. So if I'm going to help you, I have to ask you to think critically about how you have dealt with money in the past and adopt new ways of thinking about it in the present. These new ways of thinking will form the foundation that will help you benefit from the nuts and bolts practical advice I will give you later in the book. If you listen with an open mind, it will be worth the wait. The plan I offer isn't pie-in-the-sky idealism either. This is the battle-hardened financial plan that has guided my family for years. It is also the same plan I preach to other families as a real estate agent, financial advisor, and financial counselor. The benefit I've received from following this plan are emotional to me. I've survived, and I have this financial plan to thank for it. Through my own experience, I know that the information in this book can change the way you deal with money and relieve your stress. To start, we need to peek out of our foxhole and take a look around. It's time for a short assessment of the financial landscape we find ourselves facing as a country. Our collective thinking and actions created it, and now we as individuals have to live with it. Along the way, I will tell you more of my story and introduce the concept that will organize our financial plan throughout the book. Chapter 1. Houston, we have a problem. In the fall of 2011, when I first sat down to write a personal finance book for those of us who struggled to get by on a month-to-month basis, things looked pretty grim. While the U.S. unemployment rate had finally started to fall in recent months, it would take 3 years of consistent job growth to bring us to a place where things started to feel normal. Besides, actual unemployment was likely much higher than reported, because government unemployment numbers only count those actively looking for work. An unknown number of additional workers had given up. At the time, the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics estimated only 66% of working-age males were currently employed. Working-age male employment had been declining for decades, but the 2008 recession pushed it off a cliff. If you were so unfortunate as to become unemployed, it took an average of 40 weeks to find employment. Some argued long-term unemployment numbers were similar or worse than those during the Great Depression of the 1930s. It was a dark time. Now, in the winter of 2015, the unemployment rate has dropped steeply. More interestingly, the labor participation rate has continued to drop. It now sits at just under 63%. It remains a matter of strong debate as to why the participation rate continues to drop. However, I think it's safe to say that, in general, things feel a little better economically, but it's a different kind of better. For many, it's a 2 jobs just to make ends meet kind of better. It's a 24-year-old child living with parents while working part-time to pay student debt kind of better. Defining the problem. It would be easy to pull a simple writer's trick at this point. I could tell you what I call an Eden story. An Eden story is a story about the idyllic time before the beginning of our troubles. The trick works well because it resonates so powerfully within most of us. Most human beings seem to long for a time before innocence was lost. Isn't that how many fiction stories begin? There is a short time of peace that sets the stage for the conflict. In this case, the story could start in the time before we came to be controlled by big, bad personal debt. All I have to do is pick a significant decade, say the 1930s, and tell you how most people from that era felt being in debt was evil, and how they worked hard to avoid all debt. Then comes the fall from grace, the moment we sinned as a people and our troubles began. In this case, the role could be played by the post-World War II housing boom led by the new FHA mortgages. I could talk about the terrible compromises of the so-called Greatest Generation, how it was their Diners Club card that introduced our culture to easy debt and made it prestigious. I could tell you this story, but beware, like most Eden stories, it isn't the whole truth. In particular, there just hasn't been a time in our culture, or any other culture, that predates debt. Oh yes, views about debt have changed over time, and I, of course, would like to change your views about debt. But personal debt has a much longer, richer, and more interesting history in our world than our problems in the present. Debt goes back as far as the written record. In fact, there are written records pertaining to debts that predate the invention of modern currency. In every culture, in every time, some human beings have found themselves unable to pay for the necessities of life, and because of this, they have borrowed money and goods to live. For the vast majority of history, when they could no longer pay back their debts, they paid with their labor, enslaving themselves or their children to their creditors. Be grateful you were born in the modern era. Yet, even if debt has always been part of human society and will be for the foreseeable future, attitudes about debt changed over time. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that many common American beliefs about personal debt are not sustainable. Too many households continue to spend more than they bring in each month. If we continue to go deeper in debt, at some point we will not be able to make our payments, and it will have to stop. In most times and places, people have used debt to pay for the necessities of life when they have no other means of doing so. However, many of us use debt to create a lifestyle that cannot be supported by our incomes over the long term. Such an obviously paradoxical way of thinking ought to cause us to laugh out loud at the irony. Consumer debt always makes the future worse than it could be because a chunk of your income must go to the debt service payments and interest. So eating out this month on the credit card makes eating out all the more difficult next month. And if there is a financial crisis, debt service payments can make it more difficult to pay for necessities like medicine or heat. In general, consumer debt should only be used for the most dire of emergencies. One goal of this book is to help teach you new ways of thinking about debt. To do that, we will look at the effects of debt on our quality of life in detail. To begin, start by asking yourself, in what circumstances do you believe it is acceptable to go into debt? Yes, this includes those credit cards you don't pay fully each month. Credit cards that are not 100% paid off at the end of the month are debt, period. Each of us needs to examine the reasons we believe it is acceptable to use a credit card. If we want to change our financial situation for the better, each of us needs to understand the values that drive the choices we make each day. For now, don't try to change your behavior, unless you want to. Just observe your thinking and spending habits. Look at the times you use a credit card. What kind of items do you buy on credit? Are they necessities? Are they impulse buys? Just spend some time observing yourself. This isn't a right or wrong kind of quiz, so work hard to keep from judging your choices. Self-judgment acts as a trap that keeps many people from being able to change their ways. If you are going to adopt a new value system, you need to accept the one you have now and quit pretending someone else made all those financial decisions you regret. You might need to give yourself permission to be angry with yourself or cry. Don't worry about that. The rest of us are crying over our mistakes as well. You are not alone. Then, if you ever hope to change, you will need to forgive yourself and move on. Anger turned inward inhibits change like nothing else. Ironically, many Americans believe they are alone in their financial woes. Yet my experiences as a financial counselor have shown me time and again we are not alone in our suffering. I have counseled all levels of wealth, from those who live exclusively on Social Security to C-list celebrities and those who live in Beverly Hills. The amounts of income may be different, but the stories are strikingly similar. Let's not forget that poor financial choices are not limited to individuals. Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, AIG, General Motors, and Chevrolet didn't go under because they were financial geniuses. Governments are not immune either. The 2011 Eurozone crisis is simply a debt crisis on an international scale. The problem isn't yours alone, and it isn't just you who can't figure out a solution. Poor financial thinking is in the water. It's in the air that you and I breathe. It is part of our culture. So before you and I can find a new way to think, we will have to learn to recognize when our current culture gets in our way. Why fixing our country's financial problems won't be easy. To understand just how deep our cultural problems with debt run, you need to know a little more about our recent economic history. I finally began to grasp just how dire our financial situation was as a country in the winter of 2009, when I heard a presentation by a Washington State University economics professor. He showed wages for all but the very wealthiest individuals in the United States had been largely flat since 1980, when adjusted for inflation. This means since 1980, for the average American, there has been no improvement in their financial well-being because any increase in wages was simply used up by rising prices for consumer goods. He pointed out our economy is approximately 66% to 70% driven by consumer spending. Then he simply asked the question, if consumers had no extra money to spend, how did our economy grow so nicely for 28 years? It is no coincidence that credit card debt per person increased over 10 times during the same period. Our total credit card debt as a nation peaked at just over $916 billion in 2008. For nearly 30 years, at least part of our economic growth rested upon a growing personal debt bubble. The overheated housing market of 2000 to 2005 was only the last spasm of this disease. In 2007 and 2008, this 30-year-old credit bubble collapsed, and for a couple of years it looked like we might have learned our lesson. In 2007 and 2008, this 30-year credit bubble collapsed, and for a couple of years it looked like we might have learned our lesson. However, that hope quickly evaporated as personal debt started to rise as soon as the economy showed any signs of life. According to the Federal Reserve, at the end of 2014, credit card debt stands at just over $883 billion. The good news is that according to the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, the percentage of families with a balance on their credit card has continued to drop, from 46% in 2007 to 38% in 2013. So while our overall consumer debt situation hasn't improved all that much, it does look like some families are learning to live without handling their financial well-being over to the credit card companies. The problem hasn't gone away. It's just concentrated in fewer families. As people who have recently experienced the collapse of our credit bubble, this should sober us. It should make us think about what financial contingency plans we have made to protect our homes and our children from an economic storm that may come again. We may not know what the future of the economy will look like, and we may not know when we will feel like we are out of the woods. But good decisions on an ongoing basis can make the difference between weathering the storm with a few bruises and finding ourselves deeply in over our heads, facing dire consequences for the ones we love. Americans used to take providing for their basic needs for granted. We didn't worry about food or shelter. How much has changed in such a short time? While the unemployment rate may have come down, our humbled economy no longer allows any of us to take our basic needs for granted. It is now possible to work very hard, to be employed full-time, and still end up in a foreclosure, without adequate food, clothing, and transportation. My own story. My career track record doesn't create the picture-perfect resume. Over the course of a decade, I had too many different careers to make typical human resource managers comfortable. However, not all of my changes in job and career were by choice. In 2004, I discovered real estate, and for the next 4 years, I was happy in that profession. I built a good business as a residential real estate agent, but during those years, the pickings were easy. Even though I made a better income than I had previously, I still struggled to get by. When you're starting out, real estate is either feast or famine. Along the way, I made my share of financial mistakes. Once when money was tight, I refinanced my home, used the equity to pay off some debt and a car, and in the process raised my monthly mortgage payment nearly $400 per month. To this day, I deeply regret that decision. Even when times are good, we didn't seem to be able to get ahead. We lived from irregular paycheck to irregular paycheck. In between, we used a credit card or two to fill in the gaps. When the next paycheck would come, we would dump any extra onto the credit cards and put none of it in savings. What do you think would happen the next time a deal didn't close and we had another gap? Out came the credit card. In the winter of 2007, my parents invited my wife and me to take Dave Ramsey's 13-week Financial Peace University with them. What an eye-opener. There were so many aha moments throughout the course of the seminar. We began building an emergency fund and applying Ramsey's baby steps to our personal finances. Ramsey's course provided key missing pieces that deeply influenced my thinking about money and saved my family from financial disaster. However, even while taking his course, I felt something didn't quite make sense. Ramsey's conspicuous consumption was continuously on display, and his plan still made becoming rich the end goal of healthy personal finance. Reservations aside, Ramsey's classes helped, and none too soon. In the spring of 2007, the collapse of the real estate bubble began. By July, our finances dramatically tightened. Later that fall, there was a brief window during which I did pretty well by focusing on first-time buyers, but I could see what was happening. Ever since watching homes receive 30-plus offers in the summer of 2006, I had been worried about a bubble. As things ground to a halt in the fall of 2007, I figured the party was over. By early winter of 2008, the media had found their culprit. Do you remember those quaint arguments that said the majority of us were perfectly good borrowers, and it was just those evil subprime people who caused the problem? Denial is a deep river. By February, the handwriting was on the wall for many careers in real estate. In my area, there were nearly 1,800 real estate agents and only 300 sales per month. I figured if there were 2 sides to every transaction, my family would eat about 1 out of every 3 months. For some reason, that wasn't good enough for me. Late one night, I cried in my office as I decided to leave real estate. I really loved helping homebuyers and homeowners. Oh, if only I could have seen a bit farther into the future. I quickly looked around for a profession that had a similar feel, and within a month I landed a job as a financial advisor with A.G. Edwards. My first day was St. Patrick's Day, 2008. Oops. I don't care how hard you work, it isn't the best decision to start a career as a financial advisor when you are staring at the biggest bear market since 1929. After 2 corporate mergers, I ended up working for Wells Fargo and washed out in May of 2010. In January of 2011, I took a job with a nonprofit financial counseling agency to pay the mortgage. When that job ended in November, I finally gathered my thoughts and finished writing a book partially based on my experiences. In America, we love winners. We love to talk about the person who made good against long odds. Dave Ramsey is a classic example. Ramsey has made a name for himself as a personal finance guru because he has been a self-made millionaire twice, with a trip through the desert of bankruptcy in the middle. I think most of us figure that if the person has been able to dig out of bankruptcy and put together $1 million, they probably know what they're talking about when it comes to personal finance. I think this is true to a point. As I have already said, I personally benefited from Ramsey's thinking about debt. His class really saved me. I couldn't imagine what the last 8 years would have been like without it. Now, most of what seemed so strange then feels like second nature. But we also like Ramsey's story because we like to think we will all become rich someday. We all hope we are the next multimillionaire. And by all means, if you can get there, go for it. Nothing I say in this book will stand in your way. In fact, it will help. And used well, wealth can truly help relieve the burdens of life. However, I want to let you in on a little secret. If we all became millionaires, then 100 million or even $1 billion would become the new standard of wealth. Most importantly, milk would cost $300 a gallon. The scale of money would simply change, and it would still be the 1% versus the 99%. Trying to become wealthy isn't the answer. And worse, acting like we are wealthy when we are not can deeply damage our financial stability for years to come. Like Ramsey, I believe hard work is a necessary component to healthy finances. But the Ramsey story and other rags-to-riches tales have begun to ring hollow for me. I am more than a little tired of the fairy tale. After doing just what I was supposed to, where is my financial peace? What is the benefit of continuing to try when I haven't been able to get ahead? In some of my darkest moments, I have wondered why I shouldn't get a credit card and take my kids to Disneyland like my neighbors. From the fairy tale winner's corner, there will always be the retort that I just haven't wanted it badly enough. I just didn't make enough dials while a financial advisor or knock on enough doors as a real estate agent. I admit to making my share of mistakes. Haven't we all, even the winners? But enough is enough. In our new economic reality, many of us are going to do our best and still find ourselves making hard financial choices. Financial peace for the hard-working is no longer guaranteed. Was it ever? The years following my decision to write How to Manage Your Money When You Don't Have Any have been paradoxically difficult and inspiring. When I wrote the first edition of this book, I decided to go whole hog and continue on as a full-time writer. It was a leap into the unknown, and I know this will sound crazy to some of you, but I believed I was called to that leap. I think I expected some kind of miracle. I would go write a single book and all my financial problems would melt away. Yeah, well, not so much. We got by, just barely, and we had help from others. There were moments of real darkness. Most of all, I deeply feared that I would fail as a provider for my children. Not everyone greeted my decision to strike out as a full-time writer positively. I had a few painful conversations, and some people chose not to take the journey with us. I used to say that the difference between me and a schizophrenic was that I knew I was having delusions of grandeur. Yet at the time, I didn't see many options that would provide for my family. Things are stable now, but just barely, and only in the last year. Now, after sitting on step 0 of my own financial plan for many years, we are finally beginning to move forward. No rags to riches story here. Let's call it rags to thrift store or a rags to Walmart story. In truth, as hard as it was, I wouldn't change a thing. My struggles have given me many gifts, one of which has been to make crystal clear to me that I love my 3 daughters and my wife tremendously. I would do anything.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?